It's a Dangerous Business Going Out Your Door by Jetfire. Read by Deep Sky. Chapter 18. That morning, all three ponies awoke at once. They had found a small grotto to stay in overnight, out of the wind and the slight chill pervading the air. They had laid out Applejack's tarp and both her and Rarity's blankets, cushioning them against the craggy rock below. Then the three of them had bundled together at Rainbow Dash's insistence. The sky-blue Pegasus had slept between the white unicorn and the orange earth pony, stretching her wings out over both of them and drawing them close to her. Now, as they woke, all three of them could feel each other's hearts beating almost in unison. Rarity gently drew closer to Dash, while Applejack sighed contentedly. "You know," she murmured softly, "part of me is going to miss this once we're back in Ponyville." "There's always sleepovers, I suppose," Rarity said.
"Yeah,"
Dash said, nuzzling deeper into the blanket below her chin.
"Though you girls couldn't make it up to my house, which is too bad because it's really cool."
"Not unless Twilight casts another cloud-walking spell on us,"
Applejack pointed out. The mention of the stricken unicorn served to focus Rarity's mind.
"Let's not waste too much time,"
she said, pulling away from Rainbow Dash and rising to her hooves.
"I think we can make it to a grove of bed of violets today, but there's no telling if we'll find one as bright a purple as we need."
"Right,"
Applejack concurred, getting to her own hooves and flipping her hat onto her head.
"Breakfast first, though." "Of course,"
Rarity said. Dash fluttered her wings and was on her hooves, then trotted over to her saddlebags. She opened it and removed some carrots, half a loaf of bread, and the bundle of leaves containing the deer's food offerings.
"So what are you girls hungry for? I'd like some carrots and some of that naan."
"Those pansies were mighty tasty yesterday,"
Applejack said.
"I reckon I'd better not get too attached to 'em, else I'm going to start nipping 'em out of ponies' gardens." "I'm a little surprised no pony's ever done just that,"
Rarity said, lifting the bread with her magic and tearing off a piece.
"Surely we can't be the first to discover their sweet taste." "Maybe all the flower-wrangling ponies just keep it to themselves,"
Applejack thought, taking up a carrot between her hooves. She took a bite and chewed thoughtfully.
"I might be tempted to do the same."
With a grin, Dash unwrapped the leaf bundle.
"Well, I'm gonna have a pansy or two, so you can have some too, or not."
She pulled out 3 of the highly colored flowers and popped one in her mouth, chewing contentedly. They busied themselves with eating for a few moments. Then Rarity said,
"Assuming we do find the right bed of violet today, how shall we proceed on our way back?" "Well, we're definitely going to go back through the Shimmerwood,"
Applejack said.
"Once we got there, though, I was wondering if we couldn't just ask Fallaloria to teleport us back to Ponyville, if she can." "Really?"
Rarity asked. She raised an eyebrow.
You don't want to go back through Guilddale?"
"Part of me does,"
the orange earth pony said, and she lingered in silence for a moment. Then she hardened her green eyes.
"But they're planting now at Sweet Apple Acres, and I've been gone nearly 2 weeks already. I can't afford to spend any more time away. I got my duty." "When I think about it,"
Rarity said,
"I've been away so long also. Customers are probably getting desperate for some of my spring fashions. Not to mention Sweetie Belle hasn't seen me in so long. She must be worried sick."
Dash thought about the little fillies that looked up to her, thought about her good friends and how they missed her, thought about all the jobs she needed to do back in Ponyville. Yet she didn't fill herself with regret.
"You know,"
she began. She hesitated as the others turned their attention towards her.
"Duty is a funny thing. We all talk about how we have it to other things and other ponies, but sometimes we forget we've got a duty to ourselves, too."
"I never forget that,"
Rarity said.
But ideally, you must put yourself last. Others come first.
Well, I guess there's that,
Dash said, and they expected that to be her final contribution. She went on, however.
They're all connected, though. All our duties, see? You could say that your duties to other ponies come first, but if you neglect yourself, then you won't be able to help other ponies as well as you might. All this trip, all this time, we've been here because of our duty to Twilight, but we've also not avoided the times that have let us take care of ourselves either. When you spent all that time with Ashtail, Applejack.
She pointed at the orange earth pony.
When I went into the dreaming with the pronghorns, and when Falaloria taught you how to teleport, Rarity, and taught us all about the elements of harmony that was important to each of us and we needed to do it. But it wasn't just important for us, it was important for every pony who might someday need our help. Because we spent some time making ourselves better, we may be able to help other ponies that much more.
Applejack was a bit surprised to hear such wisdom from the freewheeling Pegasus. As she looked at her old friend, now covered in swirling dark blue symbols, she could see a kind of bearing that wasn't there before, a kind of nobility. It hadn't come about overnight, so she hadn't noticed it happen. She hadn't been paying attention. Now it stared her in the face. Rainbow Dash was proving her own point by her own subtle, vital transformation.
That's something to think about, Sugar Cube, for sure,
she said.
I reckon even when we get back, we're going to keep changing because of this trip. I'm sure Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy have changed in their own way as well,
Rarity added.
And even Twilight, though I wouldn't wish her experiences on any pony. When we're all together again, I suppose we'll truly be able to tell.
She turned to Applejack.
Though, Applejack, what makes you think Lady Falaloria can teleport us back to Ponyville? If she could do that, wouldn't she have offered to teleport us the rest of the way into the mountains?
Applejack bobbed her head.
Maybe, but I'm not sure. It's like Rainbow's been saying, you know? Maybe she figured we had to take the rest of the trip ourselves, for our own good. She seemed real sure that Twilight wasn't going to die, so maybe she figured we'd keep on learning and growing, going the rest of the way up on hoof. She sure was holding something back when we talked about coming back down the mountain, that's for sure.
The white unicorn thought for a moment.
You know, you may be right. I don't yet know much about being a seer, but one thing that seems to be true is that you have to be careful about what you tell ponies. If the future really is built on choices, and those choices come about because the way our true nature reacts to circumstances, then I can see the value in sometimes withholding information from a pony. Not because you want her to be hurt, but because if you do tell her about her future, it's going to change how she thinks about her choices when it comes time to make them. Perhaps knowing too much about the future is going to change the choices she makes, resulting in a different future than what you predicted.
She thought privately about Falaloria's choice to let them leave the Shimmerwood. For some pony who could see the future, choosing not to act, to allow events to unfold naturally, was an action in itself.
I shall have to remember that,
she concluded. Applejack chewed one final pansy carefully.
Knowing the future, you know, Twilight's going to give you a lecture when you tell her, right?
She said with a smile.
She's never gone in for predictions and prophecies. Perhaps I won't tell her, not yet anyway,
Rarity said.
Falaloria said the time was coming when we would all know. Perhaps we should wait until then to mention these things.
But when will we know?
Dash asked.
It may just be something we'll have to feel.
Then feel it, Dash, and recognize it when it comes,
the white unicorn said, rising to her hooves.
It's like when a pony gets their cutie mark. You know the moment when it happens.
Every pony has a nose for destiny,
Dash said with a nod.
That's something Firefly used to say. She was usually right.
She stood up.
I think we'd better get going. Twilight's still in danger.
Right on, Sugar Cube,
Applejack said.
Think you can back up the food while Rarity and I armor up?
Dash chuckled.
Now you both have armor. It's so funny.
She began to gather up the remaining bread and carrots.
I would never have pegged you for the warrior type, Rarity.
Rarity gave her a demure smile as she trotted over to her neatly arranged armor.
You should know by now, Dash, that there's more to me than first glances suggest. Did you know I took a semester of horn fencing at finishing school?
You? Fencing?
The sky blue Pegasus laughed.
I would never have seen it. Well, okay, I can see it now, but not before this trip.
Oh, I didn't like it at first,
said Rarity, levitating the flanchards and the petrel over her head.
By the end of the class, though, I was decent at it. It teaches you to be observant and patient, to look for your moment, to wait for it to arrive, and when it comes...
She tightened the armor around her torso with a pulse of magic.
You strike!
Applejack tugged her own flanchards on, rolling over to fasten the straps beneath her belly.
Huh, you make it sound like apple bucking.
That made her think of home again, and of her friends, and then she grinned.
You know what's funny? Pinkie Pie reckoned we'd see all manner of terrible critters out here, and except for the Kamagas, we ain't met a one.
Ha!
Dash laughed.
What were the things she mentioned again?
Balrogs, and something.
The orange earth pony mumbled.
I don't recall, to be honest.
The earth pony and the unicorn consumed themselves with fastening their respective sets of armor. When they were finished, Rainbow Dash had packed up all the food and even folded up the tarp and blankets. Putting those away, Applejack and Rarity fastened their saddlebags to their flanks, while Dash wrapped her scarf around her neck. Their effects securely stowed, their equipment snugly strapped, the three ponies walked side by side out of the grotto. They were decently high in the Archback Mountains, the air crisp around them, the wind a light but cool breeze. Guilddale shone gold far below them, the sun just rising ahead of them in the east, high above the distant Drakenridge Mountains.
Say, Rainbow,
Applejack asked,
do you want to go up ahead of us, check for a bit of violets?
I did think about it,
Dash said. She grinned.
Tell you what, if we can all make it up into the mountain range in 2 hours, I'll stick with you girls.
You don't even have a clock with you,
Rarity said, the sunlight sparkling off the crystal crests on her helmet.
Trust me, I can tell.
All right, then,
Rarity said, turning back up the steep and rocky path.
Shall we?
She launched herself forward at a full gallop, Applejack quick behind her. Dash brought up the rear, rainbow-streaked tail flapping behind her as she pounded her hooves on the dark stone, leading ever higher into the archbacks. Twilight screamed as another crackling bolt lanced off her horn, striking one of the walls of her bedroom. She thrashed about under the covers, sweat pouring down her face. Her horn was almost totally black. Tears leaked from the corners of her tightly shut eyes. She wasn't even thinking, just experiencing, a slave to her blinding, agonizing pain, a pain that none of the available painkillers could abate.
She's getting much hotter! More water! More water!
Zecora cried, feeling the lavender unicorn's forehead with the back of her hoof. Apple Bloom dashed out of the bedroom, and the water in the sink was running moments later.
Oh, I wish Spike were here,
Fluttershy cried, desperately stamping her hooves. They had sent Spike into the Everfree forest to get some poison joke. Zecora said its body-altering properties made it a strong painkiller, and Spike's scales would protect him from its strange side effects.
I think we need to contact Princess Celestia now.
No!
Twilight screamed.
No, friends.
Her voice was slurred, her mind fuzzing.
They'll make it in time. I know they will.
Pinkie Pie cried, bouncing in place. Each pounding of her hooves on the floor was like the striking of a hammer or the banging of a drum, and to Fluttershy it seemed like a terrible countdown had begun.
We gotta keep Twilight going just a little longer.
The butter-yellow Pegasus swallowed hard. She had first broached the subject of contacting Princess Celestia 5 days ago, but both Twilight and Pinkie had disagreed. Twilight's refusal had been unusual, as she was normally so quick to contact her teacher and mentor. The Lavender Unicorn had explained that she trusted Applejack, Rarity, and Rainbow Dash to retrieve the Beneviolet in time, and she had a deep-seated fear that she would be betraying them if she went to Celestia. This was coupled with a strange worry about bothering the princess, as though it would be a bother for her to learn her student was deathly ill. Fluttershy had suspected that the hornrot was affecting Twilight's thinking, but her refusal had been adamant, and Pinkie Pie, with her undying faith in the ability of her friends, had been quick to support her in this. The two of them had succeeded multiple times in overruling Fluttershy, and she cursed herself for her meekness. She should have been demanding, should have been insistent, but they were so heartfelt in their belief that the others would come through. Now, though, Zecora was here, and Fluttershy knew the zebra was as concerned about Twilight as she was.
Pinkie, I know you have faith in your friends,
she said firmly.
But if we do not act soon, this is where Twilight ends. But I just know. I know.
The pink Earth-Eyes ponies were bright.
I know they'll do it. They'll do it, and it'll be spectacular, and we'll all clop, clop, clop. And Twilight says, Twilight's not thinking right, Pinkie,
Fluttershy shouted, finally raising her voice.
Twilight's going to die, and we need to do something now.
Applebloom rushed back in with the damp washcloth, which Zecora applied to Twilight's forehead. Suddenly, a spark popped off the tip of her horn, and her eyes shot open, empty and glowing white.
Beware the beast that girds the earth. The greatest challenge approaches.
Her eyes shut tightly again, and she arched her back in agony.
What's that mean?
Applebloom asked.
It means something big is going to happen,
Pinkie Pie exclaimed cheerfully.
And, whoa!
The pink earth pony suddenly lost her footing, some legs going one way, some going another. She toppled over onto the ground, where she rolled onto her back.
Not now, Pinkie Pie,
Fluttershy snapped, an unusual note of annoyance crawling into her voice. When she turned towards Pinkie, however, Fluttershy was surprised to see what had befallen her. Pinkie was on her back, and her legs were moving in the air. Her right front leg and her right back leg would move forward, while her left front leg and her left back leg would move back. Then her right legs would move back while her left legs moved forward. Right legs forward, left legs back, left legs forward, right legs back, over and over.
A twitch?
She asked.
Yup,
Pinkie said, smiling.
I just knew something big was going to happen. What does that one mean?
Applebloom said.
I've never seen it before. One side forward, one side back,
Pinkie said.
It means I'm right about something I didn't think I was going to be right about. Really?
Fluttershy said. In spite of the chaos and the deadly danger to Twilight, she couldn't help raise her eyebrows.
And that doesn't happen very often? Not really,
Pinkie said cheerfully.
I'm usually spot on. Yeah, but I agree with Fluttershy and Zecora,
Applebloom said, stamping her hoof on the ground much like her sister.
We just gotta keep Twilight from dying, and if that means contacting Princess Celestia, it's what we gotta do. But, please, Pinkie,
Fluttershy said, pleading in her voice.
Just in case, if Applejack and the others are going to save Twilight,
they're going to have to do it soon. So either they will or they won't, and then Princess Celestia can save her. Or do something for her, but only if she knows.
Her twitch abating, the pink earth pony rolled over onto her belly, sprawling her legs out on the floor. She put a hoof to her chin, screwing up her face.
Well...
Then she grinned at them.
Okie dokie. Just to make you all feel better, though. We won't need Princess Celestia, you'll see. All right, then,
Fluttershy said.
When Spike gets back, we're sending a message to Celestia. No more argument.
Twilight groaned. Zecora pressed the wet washcloth harder onto her forehead, speaking gently to the unicorn in her native zebra language.
If Twilight can't even last that long,
the butter yellow Pegasus thought grimly. This was it. The next hour or two would be crucial. Even contacting Princess Celestia required Spike to be here, and they had no way of knowing when he would be back. Fluttershy didn't dare leave Twilight's side to find him. None of them did. She felt like she might cry, but she couldn't, not with Apple Bloom here. She needed to be strong, but she felt so helpless. She sank down to the floor, then put her front hooves together.
Princess Luna,
she thought.
I remember what you said to us the day you came back after the party was over. You told us you had given up on yourself, that even as Nightmare Moon, you wanted to be appreciated. But you thought there was no hope left for that, so you were focused on making every pony feel pain as revenge. But you said that when we cleansed your spirit and brought you back to yourself, and every pony in Ponyville did want to love you, you realized there had always been hope for you and every pony. So you told us you were going to take on a new divine role, because you had been helped when help seemed impossible. You were going to become the patroness of desperate causes. I pray to that part of you now, and I know I should have prayed sooner, but now things are very desperate, and we need you more than ever. And I know you're probably asleep by now, but please, hear my prayer. Don't let my friend die.
The path turned sharply, but Rarity merely slid into it, changing direction without losing speed. If she had bothered to think about it, she would probably have been amazed at her physical development. She had been worn out climbing the Drakenridge Mountains almost 2 weeks ago, but she handled the steep incline now with ease. Her silver armor flashed in the sun. The wind whipped cold around her, but she found she didn't mind it as she once might have. Behind her, Applejack kept pace, grinning at the swiftness of their ascent. The path was narrower, rockier, higher, but they hadn't slackened their pace. They were going to do it. They were going to be in the midst of the mountains before noon. Long before. They could probably find the Beneviolet in no time.
Twilight, we're gonna do it,
Applejack thought.
We're gonna save you lickety-split.
Then she thought inevitably about what would happen after. Could Falaloria teleport them back? If she could, Applejack was prepared to ask her for it. Maybe that was why the Golden Hind had been so hesitant to agree with their statements about the return journey. She would ask for it, even though it would mean not seeing Ashtail again. And here, her heart ached. She thought of him by her side, running with her. She knew he would be able to keep pace, so tough and muscled and lean. He would lean against her, breath on her neck, say into her ear, "Do what you must." He would understand. And she knew she would see him again one day. She knew it in her heart. It wasn't seeing. It wasn't what Falaloria did, but she knew.
I want him to meet Big Macintosh and Granny Smith, and I bet Apple Bloom would love him. I bet he'd love the farm, too. I bet he'd love a real honest-to-goodness apple to eat.
I should have given him some of our apples. We had a few to spare.
They passed between two great cliffs, and Rarity skidded to a halt. Catching up with her, Applejack and Rainbow Dash found themselves looking down into a great gorge, the path winding widely around the other side of the peak they had just passed. Deep at the bottom, a small stream passed through, and there was a perimeter of grass around it. The orange earth pony traced the stream to the south, where the gorge opened up into a great valley. There was green there, and she could see that it was liberally speckled with purple.
There!
She yelled, pointing to it with her hoof.
Those have got to be bed of violets.
I'll go check it out. You two hurry as fast as you can.
Dash cried, flapping her wings.
Remember, look for one that's bright purple.
Rarity cried as the sky blue Pegasus shot away.
Right,
she shouted over her shoulder.
Come on,
Applejack shouted, taking the lead down the path. Rarity followed close behind her. It wound widely around the peak, snaking over the arms of the mountain, bending down, then rising back up over and over. But they galloped. They almost broke into a full run. This was it. They were here. Wending their way around a corner, they galloped side by side as the path widened, opening into almost a full road. It curved again, and then descended, bending off to the right in a huge field of green grass. The valley they were in was enormous, easily a mile broad, and it continued for an untold number of miles off to the south. The stream running through it was a glimmer of silver. It was festooned with wildflowers, and most of them were...
bed of violets,
Rarity squealed. There were so many of them. Quite apart from her circumstantial joy, the designer in her realized that the flowers were gorgeous. Their petals were broad at the base, narrowing out into what seemed to be true points, 5 of them making the most delightful star shape, the very middle jet black, the stoma stretching out colored purest gold, and the petals themselves a rich and deep shade of violet. That made her stop and pause. Deep. Too deep. Applejack noticed as well.
They're all dark,
she cried.
They've been growing too long. Oh dear,
Rarity muttered. A nervous puddle was sloshing around her heart. With a whoosh of wind, Rainbow Dash came to a galloping landing just ahead of them, surging ahead and skidding to a stop before her friends.
They're all too dark,
she said, her features betraying a panic.
Come on now, Rainbow, you can't have seen all of them,
Applejack said, though her guts were contracting in terror.
Yes, I did. I flew low over and over and over.
We'll have to search on hoof,
Rarity snapped, refusing to despair.
Applejack, you take that side of the stream.
She pointed off to her right.
And I'll take this side. Move as quickly as you can, but be careful. Dash, fly in a zigzag over the field. Keep your eyes peeled.
But...
do it,
Rarity said, with steel in her voice. Nodding, Dash took to the sky again, starting the flight path the white unicorn had advised. Applejack galloped through the fields, leaping the stream in a single bound and then setting off, combing the grass, her green eyes surveying as keenly as she could, ever fixed on the ground. Rarity swept her blue eyes from side to side as she galloped. Something in her heart was telling her she had to hurry, that she had to find a properly colored bed of violet very soon. She crossed from one side of the field to the other, but always moving forward, she galloped. She had no idea how big this valley was. She noted that the ground was unusually soft, even more so than she was used to on fertile soil. Almost an hour later, she and Applejack arrived at the head of the valley. They hadn't gone the whole length of it. It was too big, but they'd seen enough.
Anything?
Rarity asked.
Not a bright one to be seen,
Applejack said, stomping her hoof.
I told you. But there's gotta be more fields and valleys up here. We need to keep searching. Oh, I wish we had more Pegasi with us.
Pega?
Rarity stopped hard. Her eyes widened, and in spite of the dire circumstances, she smiled enormously, lunging at Dash.
Oh, Dash, you did it! You did it! No pony even needed to correct you. Why, I could just kiss you.
She wrapped her front hooves around Dash's neck. The sky blue Pegasus was taken aback for a moment, then grinned slyly.
Well, if you want to.
Rarity drew back, an uncertain look on her face. Then she made a little noise and planted a soft kiss on Dash's forehead.
Done. Now don't say I never did it.
All right, that just proves my lesson took when yours didn't,
Applejack said with a nod.
But we gotta keep focused. We gotta find another field.
Say,
Rarity said, turning back to the north.
Could there be a field at the other end of that gorge?
She squinted, trying to look through the narrow, rocky valley. At the other end of it, some distance away, she thought she could just spy a flash of green.
I think there is.
Yeah, I see it,
Dash cried.
I'm gonna go check it out. You girls wait here.
She flapped her wings and was gone in a rainbow streak, her scarf fluttering in the breeze behind her. As Applejack watched her go, she noticed that the sky had grown dim. Looking up, she watched dark gray clouds rolling silently overhead. The wind was picking up as well, and getting colder.
Uh-oh,
she muttered.
We gotta hurry. I think there's a storm coming.
Up here, it's got to be a snowstorm, I suppose,
Rarity muttered.
We'll never find a proper bed of islet if it gets buried in snow.
Rainbow Dash flew with all her might. She was going faster than normal. It was though the wind resistance was non-existent.
Chalk it up to this handy scarf,
she thought.
I gotta remember to thank Falalaria when I see her again.
In no time, she crossed the gorge and was above another valley, this one narrower than the first. It too was filled with wildflowers, and many of them were beneviolets, but they were all dark purple, just as before. She trained her Pegasus eyes, scouring the ground, looking. She glanced further ahead. More dark purple. Then it was there, far off, isolated from the others. It was on a long, low, wide, strangely shaped hill at the highest point. A single beneviolet. But it was such a violent shade of purple it made her blink. She couldn't resist swinging back around and flying toward her friends again.
I see it,
she shouted.
I see a beneviolet. I see one that's the right color.
Go get it!
Applejack roared at the top of her lungs.
And hurry!
The sky was completely gray now. The wind began to howl.
There's a storm coming!
Nodding, Rainbow Dash wheeled about and shot across the gorge a second time, her heart pumping, every hair on her body and every feather in her wings alive. She could feel the dreaming swirl around her, feel it surge in and out of her like the ocean upon the shore. There was import to this moment. She could feel it. This was the culmination of their long, hard journey. Soaring over the valley, she flew low, coming down towards the hill. She hit it hard and galloped forward, grass brushing aside as she moved. Snowflakes began to gently descend from the sky. She skidded to a halt near the hill's summit in a shallow depression of grass. The ground here was extremely soft. She was practically sinking into it. The beneviolet was less than 100 feet away. She was so giddy that she just had to shout and jump.
Yes,
she yelled, jumping into the air and slamming her hooves hard on the earth when she landed. The ground began to rumble. Dash's body trembled as the earth beneath her shook. The whole valley, the whole mountain range shook. Her legs began to spread apart beneath her, nearly dragging her to the ground before she flapped her wings and hovered. Grass and dirt peeled away as the earth under her split. Beneath it, growing steadily larger, was a field of bright sea green, strangely slick, almost wet-looking. Whirling around in the air, Dash saw it continue for more than 20 feet the other direction. She spun again and saw it continue for another 20 feet, still growing bigger. Then she looked just beneath her. Here, the green was not, and in its place was thick, empty black. The mountains were still trembling. In fact, they were shaking even harder, a rumble growing louder and louder. She flapped her wings backwards, pulling away from the hill. The field of sea green was brilliant and unnatural, and she realized that the black she had seen was a line that nearly bisected the sea green. It was thicker than two ponies side by side. The sea green stopped expanding, now making a strangely ovoid shape of huge size. For a moment, the mountain range was still. The great black line twitched from side to side, sending Dash's heart into her throat. Then the line narrowed. The hill exploded. Dirt and grass and flowers and rock blew everywhere, filling the air as the very ground beneath her rose. She flew skyward, but it followed her, higher and higher, whole fields worth of brown dirt falling away, revealing blackness, revealing slickness. Still, the bright purple bed of violet was intact. It seemed to be wedged in a kind of crevice, a ridge taller than sugar-hued corner. Panicking, she arced back to the south, flying to where she knew her friends were, snow now filling the air around her. Applejack and Rarity were gaping at the sight before them. A whole chunk of the mountain had just risen into the air, and it continued to rise on a titanic column of blackness. The narrow gorge exploded, chunks of stone the size of Applejack's barn, the size of Ponyville's library, flying hundreds of feet skyward in every direction, water spraying everywhere as the stream was torn apart. A sky blue blur was suddenly hurtling towards them, streaking to a stop, and suddenly Rainbow Dash hovered and screamed,
Run!
Applejack and Rarity needed no further encouragement. They turned and galloped. No, they ran as fast as their legs could carry them, and it seemed that at their heels the valley shredded, hills of dirt, acres of grass, tearing apart and flying away. The mountains were shuddering. They ran and ran for minutes, foam flecking the corners of their mouths. Dash flying right beside them, not wanting to leave them, though she was filled with fear. Minutes turned to tens of minutes, and they still ran, panting, and still the mountains shuddered. And still, when they looked over their shoulder, the Tower of Blackness rose, too thick, filling the horizon, unable to be properly studied. At last they reached the end of the long valley, a steep decline. They lost their footing and tumbled down it, Rarity having the presence of mind to turn her fall into a sideways roll, so that the crests on her helmet did not catch on something and break her neck. They tumbled down and down until they reached a barren field of stone, the mountain peaks stretching, curving overhead all around like an arena, like a stadium. Dash looked ahead and barely glimpsed some crumbling stone structure, a long table, an ancient arch, far off in the middle of the barren vista. Her friends got to their hooves and still ran, running across the bare rock until finally Rarity's newfound endurance failed her, and she stumbled to a stop, panting and hacking for breath in the increasingly cold air. Applejack stopped as well, her breath coming out in a fog. Rainbow Dash skidded to a stop before them.
What?
Was all she could say, was all she could think to say, but she got no further. A long, low hiss pervaded the whole of the air. Fear raced up each pony's spine. They turned slowly around. It had stopped rising. 2 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles or more into the sky. Some of its body, perhaps most of its body, still seemed to be submerged in the earth, but what protruded out and up was as broad as the whole of the Everfree forest. It was jet black all over, even on its vast belly. Up and up, craning back their necks to see, until their wandering eyes stopped at its huge head, bigger than Canterlot, shaped like a giant spade. 4 blazing green eyes, each one bigger than an Ursa Major, flitted with unholy speed across the world, thick black lines for pupils. It opened its mouth. Fangs the size of Ponyville were a dull bone white. A long, dull blue tongue, wider than a dragon's wingspan, longer than the road between Ponyville and the Everfree Forest, lolled out, flicked. Another hiss rose on the wind. Applejack swallowed hard. Now she remembered what Pinkie Pie had said.
You reckon that's a world snake?
Yeah,
Dash said.
I reckon.